Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of The Great Ruler Season 2 Part 27 based on novel. So let's start. A clear sword ringing sound accompanied the boundless sword aura as it shot directly through the clouds. The swift and fierce sword aura undulated in the skies, causing the skies to seemingly turn dark and gloomy. The originally clamoring sounds that pervaded the air in the square had stopped upon this happening. Regardless of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy or the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy, the faces on all of the students had a shadow of graveness. No one would have imagined that this young lady that seemed outstanding in both her temperament and beauty would actually be able to display such an astonishing and imposing manner. However, with such strength, how was she still ranked as the number 10 on the heavenly rankings? This was absolutely enough to target the top 3 rankings. Su Xian, He Yao, and the rest were all in shock with amazement displayed on their faces. This was especially true for He Yao. He had a vexatious expression on his face. Amongst the students from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, there were merely 2 people who could be said to have truly stepped into the heavenly completion stage. Those 2 were Shen Changsheng and Li Xiantong. Even Mu Chen, who had various methods and exceedingly strong combat prowess, was too far away from the heavenly completion stage with regards to his true power. Originally, He Yao had assumed that Mu Chen would be the 3rd person to step into the heavenly completion stage. However, who could have thought that Luo Li, someone who had extremely little occasions to cross hands with people and someone that revealed her true strength in extremely few occasions, would actually possess such frightening strength? This pair of lovers was simply abnormal. Were they not afraid of their diaphragms feeling unbearable by hiding like that? There were a few people who were secretly clenching their teeth, because this was obviously quite a big blow to them. However, other than those few depressed people, the absolute majority of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students had joy and happiness rushing out of their eyes. Luo Li's strength was this strong. In that case, that Liu Shan could no longer continue to be that insolent anymore. HMPH, a single sword? You're too arrogant. Under the innumerable attentive gazes from the surroundings, the startled expression of Liu Shan disappeared as he snorted with a cold laugh. This Luo Li's strength had truly far exceeded his expectations. However, it was still at the initial level of the heavenly completion stage. If she wanted to defeat him by using a single sword, that was simply an enormous joke. However, Luo Li seemed to have not heard his cold laughter. Clenching the Luo Shan sword in her jade-like hands, her slender fingers ran across the sword sheath. In the next instant, a cold light blossomed as the Luo Shan sword left its sheath once again. Upon its appearance, the entire world seemed to have turned cold and frosty. A sword aura blotted the skies as a 300-meter-long gargantuan light blade shot into the skies. The boundless and majestic sword aura started to condense at an astonishing speed. In a short few breaths, the 300-meter-long gargantuan light sword started to condense and form a river of sword aura. With its appearance, a frightening sword aura started to radiate from it. As he looked at the river of sword aura, there was a faint change in the expression on Liu Shan's face. A chilling intent arose from his skin as an extremely dangerous fluctuation started to erupt from his heart. Seeing that, Luo Li gently strutted forward. With a light tremble of her jade-like hands, the long sword in her hand was gently thrusted out. Buzz! The long sword buzzed and screamed as if something was resonating with the sword. In the sky, the river of sword aura started to surge downwards, turning into an eye-catching light beam. Carrying along an indescribably swift and fierce sword aura, it swept fiercely towards Liu Shan. A single sword turned into the Luo River. Bang! 10,000 strands of sword aura surged forward, and before the river of sword aura descended towards the ground, the earth was already sliced to a disastrous state. At this time Luo Li had displayed all of her strength and put everything into this move. Therefore, this time, it was much stronger than the previous time in the hunting war. Liu Shan raised his head, the image of the river of sword aura reflecting off his pupils. At this time, his gaze had turned extremely grave as he thought, this single sword truly is astonishing. However, wanting to make him, Liu Shan admit defeat was not that easy to do. A cold glint surged out from within his eyes and with a grasp of his hand, a scarlet spear suddenly appeared within it. From the spear in his hand, an erratic spiritual energy fluctuation swept out, like flames. Fire God's War Spear. All of the spiritual energy exploded from within his body without a trace of restraint. A scarlet-colored spiritual energy shot up towards the sky. With a frontal thrust of his spear, the air within the region seemed to have been pierced through and was ruptured by it. Bang! Everyone present could see the dreadful flames erupting explosively from within Liu Xun's body as a scarlet light engulfed the heavens and earth like the rage of the fire god. Carrying along torrential amounts of angry flames, it violently collided against the river of sword aura. Bang! At the instant of the collision, the sword aura and the scarlet light exploded. The sword aura wreaked havoc across the area, causing the earth to instantaneously shatter and crumble as a gigantic fissure rapidly extended on the ground. At this moment, the scarlet light suddenly shattered. As the sword aura swept across, it actually managed to thoroughly slice and break down the scarlet-colored spiritual energy that was akin to flames. A dumbstruck look appeared within Liu Xun's eyes as he thought, her sword aura is so swift and fierce and it has far exceeded my expectations. His hand started to tremble as he explosively retreated, not daring to have the resolve to face that sharp edge again. However, just as he started to retreat and his imposing manner had weakened, a beautiful, graceful figure shot towards him with the sword aura that blotted the skies seemed to follow the beautiful figure as it started to surge towards her. Akin to lightning, the sword aura tore space apart and headed directly towards Liu Xun as he stared at it with an aghast look. That speed was too quick, and he could only watch helplessly as the sharp edge rapidly grew larger in his view. However, he did not have a single trace of energy left to evade it. As the sword light swept forward, the body of the sword, which rippled like water, patted Liu Xun's chest before the sword aura erupted out. Bang! Liu Xun flew across the sky, before landing disastrously on the outside of the arena. A mouthful of fresh blood violently spurted out as his face turned deathly pale, while his eyes became filled with terror and relief that he had survived. He had previously tasted the feeling of death when the sword aura struck him. If Luo Li wanted to kill him, he would have absolutely no way to live. The victor had appeared too quickly. The grace of that single sword was only felt by a minority of people. However, when Liu Xun disastrously landed on the ground, everyone present already knew who the victor was. Therefore, cheers of joy that shook the world instantly rang out from the location of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Su Xian, He Yao, and the rest wore expressions of astonishment as they stared at the beautiful figure in the arena with somewhat peculiar gazes. Who would have thought that this young lady, who had only followed quietly behind Mu Chen, would actually hide such strength? All of them had underestimated her. She did not only possess a beauty and temperament that stole people's breaths away, her strength was equally breathtaking. She truly is formidable, exclaimed Xu Huang with a sigh. This batch of freshmen were truly outstanding. Having won Mu Chen was already enough, and now, who would have thought that this girl, who was usually quiet, would actually be that terrifying? It looked like she had purposefully restrained her sharp edge when standing beside Mu Chen and acted introvertly. Yet, just like the uncommon sword in her hand, there would be a day that she would reveal her sharp edge. And that was today. While the students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were cheering, the students of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy wore indeterminate and downcast expressions. At the beginning, they were still feeling excited, however, who could have imagined that after a short moment, there would be such a thorough reversal in the situation? Liu Xun of the Heavenly Completion stage had actually been defeated in such a short amount of time. On the podium, the smiling face of the Dean of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy, Fei Qingsong, slightly twitched, before saying with a smile, undoubtedly one of the 5 great academies. Who would have thought that there was actually such a formidable person, other than the top 10 on the heavenly ranking that had yet to reveal themselves? Dean Taikeng smiled as he looked towards the young lady standing in the arena and replied, "You're overpraising, Dean Fei. Luo Li dislikes fighting, and if not for her emotions being different from other days, she would not have taken action." Fei Qingsong also smiled. Narrowing his eyes, he said, "She is called Luo Li?" That sword that she had executed. It made me recall the Luotian sword technique of the Luotian clan. Could it be that she is a member of the Luotian clan? Dean Taikang refused to comment and replied, since Liu Shan was defeated, this exchange should end here. Both parties had their wins, and Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy sure is strong and robust. Ha ha, wait a moment, said Fei Qingsong with a grin. Dean Taikang, we, the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy, still have people that have yet to fight. I didn't say that Liu Shan was the strongest student of our Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy. Furthermore, although you all have a member of the Luotian clan. Ha ha. We also have a student with a special background. Upon hearing his words, Dean Taikang could not resist wrinkling his forehead. This Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy had surely come prepared. On the arena, Luo Li slowly started to restrain the sword aura that surrounded her body as she quietly looked towards Liu Shan, who looked like a sorry figure, and said, "Your spiritual energy is superficial. It seems that there was someone who had forcefully risen your strength. With your original capabilities, you don't have the qualifications to challenge the top 3 of the heavenly rankings within our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy." An ugly expression appeared on Liu Shan's face as he wanted to curse out. However, due to that previous fierce and swift sword of hers appearing in his mind, he was unable to speak at that moment. That faintly trembling appearance had lost all of its previous awe. The students of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy clenched their teeth. However, there was still no one who dared to open their mouths and speak. Even Liu Shan was defeated, and it was obvious that they were not able to achieve victory against Luo Li. Luo Li looked towards the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy students, who were suppressing their rage and anger, before graceful turning and walking away with the longsword in her jade-like hands. Although she did not like to fight with people in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, she was still a student here and would naturally not stand at a corner and watch the people from the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy come there and humiliate the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. However, since she had already achieved her objective, she would not continue to stay in the arena. Looking at Luo Li, who had turned her body and walked away, Liu Shan clenched his fists, before finally calming down. A disappointed look appeared within his eyes as he understood that he truly was not a match for Luo Li. Ha ha. However, just as Luo Li had taken 2 steps, a soft laughing voice slowly rang out from within the group of students of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy. Upon hearing that laughter, a slight pause occurred in Luo Li's footsteps. After hearing the laughter, unexpectedly, those few Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy students had a cold shiver run up their bodies as the expressions on their faces changed. Innumerable gazes shot towards the direction of the laughing voice. At the rearmost position within the group of Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy students, a figure slowly stood up and walked through the group. Finally standing in front of Liu Shan, he casually said, "Useless." A faint tremor ran through Liu Shan, however, he could only unwillingly lower his head. The figure strode past Liu Shan and slowly walked onto the arena. Raising his head, a handsome face was revealed. On his face was a pair of scarlet pupils that looked akin to blood, which made them particularly eye-catching. Ha ha, Luo Li, the next empress of the Luo god clan. I never imagined that you would actually be at this place. Luo Li turned around. When she spotted the scarlet pupils of the man in front of her that were akin to blood, an endless chilling intent erupted from within her clear and limpid eyes. Her jade-like hand slowly gripped her longsword tightly as a cold voice filled with chilling intent spilled out from those red lips. Blood God Clan. Blood God Clan. When those 3 words rang out from Luo Li's lips, the absolutely beautiful face of the girl had already turned ice cold. Swift and fierce killing intent had even erupted from within her eyes. This kind of emotion and state of mind was rarely displayed by her. The handsome youth gave a faint smile. Wearing a striking set of blood-red robes, an aura reeking of blood seemed to radiate from his entire body, while the pair of eyes that seemed to be colored with fresh blood appeared extremely mysterious and strange. Looks like the news that we've gotten out really is real. Being the next empress of the Luo god clan, you've not properly received the inheritance under the protection of Luo Qianshan, and have run all the way to this Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The handsome youth smiled and said, "Is this your escape?" Luo Li's jade-like hand slowly gripped the Luotian sword tightly as her expression grew even more cold and frosty. "That's right, I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Xuesha. A member of the Blood God's royal clan." The handsome youth faintly bowed forward, appearing modest and cultured. However, the unconcealable aura of blood radiating from him caused people to feel wary and vigilant. Like the Luo god clan, the Blood God clan was one of the 4 god clans in the Western Heaven world. The person in front of them had unexpectedly come from the same place as Luo Li. Shueisha? I've never heard of such a name within the Blood God's royal clan. Looks like your status within the Blood God clan isn't high, right? Said Luo Li in a cold and detached voice as she stared at the handsome youth in front of her. Hearing her reply, a cold glint flashed within the blood-red eyes of the handsome youth. With an increasingly thick smile, he replied, "If I'm able to capture you, my status would naturally be different." By yourself, gripping her long sword tightly, Luo Li slowly spoke out. "Ha ha, being able to be crowned as the next Luo Empress by Luo Qianshan, naturally, I dare not show any contempt towards you. However, your age is, after all, too young, and you've not even received a single inheritance," replied Shueisha as he licked his lip, while his blood-red pupils stared at Luo Li. At this moment, a thick bloody light erupted from his palms, radiating with bloodthirsty fluctuations. "As for me, I've already received the inheritance once. Therefore, you have to be careful, and don't get killed by me. Otherwise, your Luo god clan will truly be finished." "You don't have to worry about that," replied Luo Li indifferently. Shueisha responded with a smile. However, there was not the slightest bit of laughing intent within his eyes. In the next instant, he took a step forward. Bloody spiritual energy that blotted the skies gushed out from him, and the originally bright skies were instantly dyed blood-red. Thick auras of fresh blood rippled and undulated across the heavens and earth. The fluctuations of that boundless spiritual energy was unexpectedly more tyrannical than Liu Zheng's. These fluctuations seemed to already be at the brink of reaching heavenly completion stage middle phase. This fellow was even more formidable than Liu Zheng. The expressions of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy student masses had also violently contorted at this moment, while shock erupted from within their eyes. No one would have guessed that there would actually be a person within the ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy that was even stronger than Liu Zheng. Graveness had also flooded the expressions of Su Xian and the rest. This ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy truly had the intent to give their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy a fierce kick to the face. When did the people of the Blood God clan run into the ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy? At the chief podium, Dean Taikang stared at Shueisha, before casually asking this. "Ha ha, isn't your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy the same? Nowadays, our ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy can be considered to have some fame and reputation. Even some of those strong clans are willing to let their members come to our spiritual academy to train and cultivate," replied Fei Qingsong with a beaming smile. Dean Taikang did not respond with any comment. However, he thought, for the sake of raising their fame and reputation, the ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy really did whatever they could. The Hall Master of the Punishment Hall, Mo Yu, had also wrinkled his forehead. This ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy truly was somewhat undiscriminating. However, being the overlords of the North, there's nothing they could say, but only hope that Luo Li would be able to stabilize the situation. However, dealing with that member of the Blood God clan seemed to be easier said than done. On the square, Luo Li's eyes faintly narrowed. If this Shueisha's strength was to progress one step further, he would be able to break through to heavenly completion stage middle phase. Furthermore, his spiritual energy was even stronger than Liu Zheng's. From the perspective of stages, he and Liu Zheng were both at the heavenly completion stage initial phase. However, Luo Li knew that Liu Zheng was absolutely not Shueisha's match. After all, regardless of their appearance of strength, Shueisha was a member of the Blood God's royal clan. Therefore, the latter was not someone that Liu Zheng could compare to. "Luo Li, let me see exactly how formidable the next empress of the Luo God clan is," said Shueisha as he locked his blood-red eyes on Luo Li, while the smile at the corner of his mouth grew increasingly bloodthirsty. Luo Li's charming face grew increasingly frosty as the boundless quantity of swift and fierce sword aura rushed to the skies once again. As the sword aura that blotted the skies converged, the sword river condensed once again. Obviously, Luo Li did not have any intent to show any mercy. Upon launching her attack, she had used her killing move. "Wanting to use a single sword to deal with me? Ha ha! Let us see exactly whose single move is superior. With a sinister smile, a chilling light erupted from the blood-red eyes of Shueisha. In the next instant, his figure explosively shot forward as a blood aura that blotted the skies immediately surged forth. Akin to a sea of blood, they hid the skies and covered the earth as they swept towards Luo Li. As Luo Li's jade-like hand faintly trembled, her charming figure shot out similarly at the same time, while the sword river howled as it swept out. Seemingly merging together, a sword light that carried along a swift and fierce sword aura surged out, splitting the horizon apart. This sword of hers appeared to contain a much thicker and colder killing intent than her previous one. Seeing this spectacle unfolding before them, everyone opened their eyes wide. Both parties had no intention of warming up. Upon taking action, they had planned to use their killing moves to inflict serious injuries to one another. Sword of the Blood Sea. The Sea of Blood and the Sword River seemingly collided together in an instant. As the two incomparably violent and explosive attacks collided, within the Sea of Blood, Shueisha gave a sudden cold roar. With a clench of his palm, a long sword that seemed to be forged from fresh blood had condensed within. Bringing along a torrential blood aura, he thrusted his sword out. As the Sea of Blood and the Sword River pervaded out, the two long swords furiously collided against each other. The earth below the two cracked and shattered, while distortions seemingly appeared in the air. The two long swords vibrated intensely as their tips pressed against one another, with one side filled with boundless spiritual energy while the other being filled with erratic bloodthirstiness. Two sword auras that were similarly filled with extremely strong destructiveness smashed against one another. The devastation brought forth instantly caused deep fissures to form on the earth around them. As Shueisha's arm violently shook, his blood-red eyes sparkled, while a sinister smile rose from the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, the sea of blood behind him churned and rolled, before transforming into a screen of blood. Within the screen of blood, there seemed to be a pair of soldiers condensed from fresh blood as they howled and exited. At the back of the powerful current were gigantic cities. Those cities were sparkling with gigantic lightning flags, where a golden-colored dazzling word was present. Luo. As the current of blood surged forth, those cities were instantly destroyed. Countless people turned into bloody waters under the current, while mournful cries of despair rang out from within. Luo Li, take a look. As of now, the territories of your Luo god clan are continuously being devoured. Those citizens that have worshipped your Luo god clan are continuously being bathed by blood, roared Shueisha with a sinister smile. With a demonic sound, the laughter rushed toward Luo Li. Seeing the images of bloody seas within the screen of blood, Luo Li's mind violently shook, while a distressed mood rushed towards her mind, causing her sword aura to collapse. At the moment when her sword aura collapsed, Luo Li was able to sense and understand that her opponent was disrupting her mind. This was the method that the Blood God clan was the most adept at. However, at this moment, she was already a step too late. "Ha ha, you're too tender, after all," said Shueisha with a sinister chuckle. At the instant where the sword aura that completely surrounded Luo Li faintly weakened, the blood sword in his hand instantly erupted with a blood aura that blotted the skies. As the sword light howled further, it pierced through Luo Li's defenses, causing the bloodlight to impact against her delicate figure. Luo Li's delicate figure instantly flew out. However, at that very instant, with a raise of her jade-like hand, a ray of sword light pierced through Shueisha's shoulder at lightning speed. As the sword aura devastated the surroundings, the two figures flew out. Luo Li's body landed directly out of the square. Descending, her charming face was filled with a slightly frosty expression, while blood flowed along her slender jade-like fingers before dripping onto the ground. On the square, Shueisha had stabilized his body. A sword slash was present on his shoulder, with fresh blood staining his robes. However, he did not give the slightest care about his injury. As a bloodlight erupted out, the blood around his shoulder completely retracted within his body. Even his injury was rapidly healing itself. Ha ha, Empress Luo is truly soft-hearted. Only such a scene is able to shake your mind and concentration. In the future, when you're in charge of the Luo God clan, how can that be a good thing? A smirk appeared on Shueisha's handsome face as he stared at Luo Li, who was sent flying off of the square with ridiculement in his eyes. Continuing his statement, he said, One cannot have such compassion if one wants to become the ruler of a clan. Luo Li's charming face instantly turned cold as she gripped her longsword tightly. If not for Shueisha's method that had shook her mind and disrupted her concentration, it was absolutely not possible for him to force her off the square. Shameless! Roars of fury and anger instantly erupted from the side of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students. This Shueisha was too despicable. He had actually used such an underhanded method. However, facing their condemning roars, Shueisha did not give the slightest bit of care. With a ridiculing smile, he said, "Victory and defeat has been decided for his match. If there are still students of your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy that are not convinced, you can come up by all means. By then, you'll be able to clearly understand whether I've only those few means and methods." The expressions of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students turned ashen in anger as they thought, "This Shueisha is simply more repulsive and abominable than the previous one, Liu Shen." However, although they were angry and furious, at this time, almost all of the elite students of their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy had already taken action. Even Luo Li, who had demonstrated her extraordinary skill and talent, had been forced off the square by Shueisha. According to the rules, she had already lost the qualifications to continue fighting. Therefore, aside from feeling angry and furious, there was no one that could step out from their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. All of their faces appeared extremely sullen as they thought, if only one of the top 3 ranks on the heavenly rankings were here. We'd like to see if these fellows would be that rampant then. I know that the top 3 ranks on the so-called heavenly rankings of your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy aren't here. Since that's the case, I'll give you all a chance. For 3 days, we'll be right here. Within these 3 days, you guys can try all you want to call them back. A mocking arc rose from the corner of Shueisha's mouth as he said, "Naturally, as long as they truly dare to appear." Upon saying those words, he did not continue waiting. Turning around, he proceeded to leave the square. However, just as Shueisha had turned around, at the chief podium, a faint smile suddenly surfaced on the face of Din Tai Kang. Standing by his side, Fei Qingsong also seemed to have sensed something, since he had knitted his brows together. The space above the northern square started to distort and warp, while peals of thunder seemed to ring out from within. This sudden spectacle immediately attracted the attention of everyone as shocked and startled gazes panned over. Shueisha's footsteps had also froze as his blood-red eyes faintly narrowed. Raising his head, he stared at the distorted space. From there, lightning light sparkled around as a thin figure slowly walked out from within. Following the appearance of the figure, peals of thunder seemingly resounded across the skies as familiar spiritual energy fluctuations radiated across the heavens and earth. Feeling those spiritual energy fluctuations, countless Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students furiously rose from their seats while unconcealable joy and surprise erupted from their eyes. These fluctuations, they are Mu Chen's. He had finally appeared. In the air above the northern square. As the space distorted into a whirlpool shape, a thin figure slowly walked out from within. At the moment when it stepped out, spiritual energy fluctuations that felt familiar and tyrannical to everyone rippled and undulated across the stretch of world. Mu Chen. At this moment, the eyes of countless Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy students were all wide open as ecstasy uncontrollably erupted from within. Those spiritual energies were too familiar to them. Mu Chen's arrived. He's finally here. It's good now. Let's see if those fellows from the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy dare to continue being that rampant. Earth-shatteringly passionate and fervent voices rang out around the northern square as everyone's faces were brimming with joy and surprise. As of now, Mu Chen's reputation and prestige were no weaker than Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong. When the latter two were not at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Mu Chen's prestige was obviously the greatest. During the final fight of the hunting war that day, he had thoroughly cemented himself at the apex position within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. That position was something that even He Yao was unable to strive for. This fellow, he's finally appeared. Su Xian and the rest felt as though a heavy rock had been lifted off their backs. Mu Chen's appearance had undeniably given every student a dose of adrenaline. Beside her, He Yao's expression started to waver between cloudy and clear. However, in the end, he did not say anything out loud. As of now, regardless of prestige or strength, Mu Chen was already above him. Even though he was unresigned, there was nothing that he could do. Within the square, Shueisha stared at the figure that had stepped out from the spatial whirlpool across the horizon with faintly narrowed eyes. From the passionate and fervent voices that rang out of his surroundings, he was able to realize the identity of the latter. This is Mu Chen, third rank on the heavenly rankings? After realizing that, a cold laugh rang out from Shueisha. Indeed, he wanted to see exactly how capable the third rank on the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's heavenly rankings was to actually inspire such confidence in them. The entire square was enveloped by this passionate and fervent atmosphere. This caused Mu Chen, who had appeared in the air, to faintly feel some bafflement. Just an instant ago, he had just exited his long and deep state of training. However, after leaving his training state of mind, without even having the opportunity to say his thanks to the bald old man, the latter had shattered and cracked space apart, before throwing him in. Therefore, he had appeared at this location. What's the matter? Mu Chen muttered with a slightly wrinkled forehead as he looked towards the northern square below him. After undergoing closed-state training for over a month, there shouldn't be any big incidents happening in the academy, right? Why was it so lively down there? Mu Chen's gaze swept across the northern square below him. In the next instant, a chill suddenly erupted from within his eyes. He had spotted Luo Li standing below the square. Currently, eye-piercing blood was dripping from the latter's jade-like hands. Luo Li's injured? A wave of anger flashed within Mu Chen's eyes as his figure instantly shot forward. Before appearing before Luo Li, faintly frowning, he asked in a low and deep voice, "What happened?" Upon seeing the appearance of Mu Chen, a shadow of happiness flashed within Luo Li's eyes. Gently wiping away the blood stains on her hand, she replied with a faint smile, "It's just a small injury, nothing of any importance." "Who did it?" Mu Chen asked in a deep voice. As of now, there were not that many people who dare to provoke them within this Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, right? Could it be He Yao? Hadn't that fellow fought enough? "I did it." At this moment, an indifferent voice rang out from close by. Slowly turning around, Mu Chen looked towards the square and imprinted the youth with blood-red eyes, who was clad in blood-red robes and standing with his hands behind his back, within his eyes. "Who are you?" Mu Chen asked while his forehead faintly wrinkled up. The person before him was extremely unfamiliar, and he had never seen such a person within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy before. From a short distance away, Su Xian shot over, before descending beside Mu Chen. In a low voice, she explained the whole story of what happened to him. As she continued her account, Mu Chen's expression grew increasingly ugly. This was especially so the moment when he heard that the youth with blood-red eyes before him had used such a despicable method to cause Luo Li to lose her concentration, injuring her shoulder and forcing her out of the square. As of now, the expression on his face was as dark and overcast as a thunderstorm. "Sorry. We've originally planned to not let Luo Li get entangled with this. However, we truly had no one else to rely on. Shen Songsheng and Li Xiantong had temporarily left the academy while you have been missing," said Su Xian with some regret. "Senior Sister Su Xian, I'm also a student of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Protecting its name is also my duty," Luo Li's voice gently interrupted Su Xian's apology. Mu Chen nodded his head faintly, while his originally dark and overcast expression slowly returned to calmness at this moment. With a soft voice, he said, "You two step back first. Next, let me take over." Seeing that Mu Chen was that calm, while having such chilling intent gushing out from his voice, Su Xian and Luo Li both knew that the former had become angry. Next, he would take action. Careful, he's a member of the Blood God clan, one of the 4 god clans in the Western Heavenly World, reminded Luo Li. Although this Shueisha had used some despicable methods, anyone who neglected his strength due to this might have to pay serious consequences. Hearing her reminder, Mu Chen gently nodded his head. Blood God clan, huh? Although they're influential fellows, they didn't have the qualifications to extend to such a place. Since they'd extended to such a place, Mu Chen didn't mind to chopping this extension off. Due to Luo Li, Mu Chen did not have the slightest bit of favorable impressions towards the other 3 god clans in the Western Heavenly World. Luo Li and Su Xian proceeded to retreat, leaving Mu Chen alone, standing in the square. Upon seeing this scene, the atmosphere within the students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy instantly flared up and became more fervent. "Brother Mu, beat that wretch to death. Make them scram out of our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy with their tails between their legs." Various kinds of voices and words rushed towards the sky. Those students from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy all appeared to be psyched up, since all of them appeared to be emotional and excited. The students of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy looked at each other. Obviously, they had never imagined that the students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, who had all looked sullen and were about to die, would change and have such confidence. Could it be due to that youth by the name of Mu Chen? They casted their doubtful gazes towards the youth, who was slowly walking towards the square. Is that young? At that age, he obviously didn't have the look of an elite student that had a bountiful experience. On the chief podium, Fei Qingsong faintly narrowed his eyes as he stared at the figure of the youth. With a smile, he said, "Is this Mu Chen person the third rank on your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's heavenly rankings? However, his strength seems to be far from enough." With his eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that the current Mu Chen had not even reached the stage of heavenly completion stage. Seemingly more than half of the top 10 ranks of the heavenly rankings were even stronger than him. With a faint smile, Dean Taikang replied, "There are times when looking only at the cover would cause one to suffer a crushing defeat." "Oh." Fei Qingsong's eyebrows jumped, before saying with a smile, "Then I really have to see exactly what capabilities this Mu Chen has. Is the third rank on the heavenly rankings, right?" "Ha ha." Dean Taikang, "If you are to lose again, you might not be able to say anything more. As for Shen Sangsheng and Li Xiantong, I think that Shueisha and their group would compare notes with them in the future." Hearing his words, Dean Taikang smiled, without saying anything in response, and cast his gaze that was filled with interest towards the youth on the square. As of now, the latter seemed to be much more stronger than a month ago. However, he did not know if this time, would the latter be able to fill the entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy with shock once again. Under the fervent atmosphere, as well as the doubtful gazes of the Ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy, Mu Chen walked onto the square and stood at a distance not far from Shueisha. At this moment, those pair of black eyes radiated with an indifferent chilling glint. "The third rank of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy doesn't seem to be as strong as I've expected," said Shueisha as he stared at Mu Chen. He was unable to feel any spiritual energy fluctuations radiating from the latter's body that was comparable to his own. "You should not have injured her," said Mu Chen slowly as his pupils faintly drooped down. "Oh." Shueisha's eyebrows were faintly raised up. Staring at Mu Chen with his blood-red eyes, he smiled and said, "She truly is very formidable. If she used her true power, even I might not be her match. However, she's still somewhat too soft-hearted. Even I am easily able to shake her mind, that is her weakness. Therefore, I'll have you pay some price for that." Mu Chen seemed to not care about Shueisha's voice. Minding his own business, his voice softly rang out. "Ha ha." Shueisha gave a smile, one that contained thick bloodthirstiness. Tilting his head to stare at Mu Chen, he replied, "Just based on you. Who do you think you are?" As his last words rang out, the smile on Shueisha's face had completely disappeared, being replaced by a cold and sinister expression. He dreaded Luo Li, and, therefore, used that underhand method against her. However, who did the fellow in front of him think he was, daring to be pretentious in front of him? "You're looking to die?" The blood-red color within Shueisha's eyes intensified, as blood-red spiritual energy that blotted the skies swept out from him. A thick smell of blood permeated the skies, while strong spiritual energy pressure came enveloping over. Compared to before, this was even stronger. Obviously, this Shueisha already had the intent to kill. Outside of the square, Zhu Xian and the rest had grave expressions on their faces. The strength of this Shueisha seemed to be even stronger than Ji Yu Qianyang by a sliver. They truly didn't know exactly how Mu Chen would deal with him. After all, this time won't be a friendly comparison of notes, like last time. For the sake of achieving victory in this fight, both sides would use any methods. Under the pressure from the blood-red spiritual energy that blotted the skies, Mu Chen slowly exhaled a clump of white air. Raising his head, black lightning seemed to gush out from the depths of his black eyes. Abruptly clenching his fists tightly, spiritual energy similarly erupted from his body without the slightest restraint. Boom! Burning with black flames, spiritual energy akin to smoke plumes gushed out and rushed across the horizon. Pervading out, without caring about the pressure coming from the blood-red spiritual energy, it shot straight up like a pillar of light, with nothing that could shake it. Heavenly Transformation Stage Late Phase. Clamoring instantly arose from the entire square, with the ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy students gawking and feeling shocked first. In the next moment, mocking arcs appeared, bit by bit, on the corners of their mouths. How exactly did someone become the third rank of the heavenly rankings with such strength? Their gazes turned to mockery and ridicule as they looked towards the students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. However, to their surprise, they saw that the students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were using mocking gazes to stare back at them, as though rejoicing in the misfortune that was about to befall the ancient Cauldron Spiritual Academy students. This group of idiots. They dared to even send a Heavenly Transformation Stage Late Phase person up. They are truly asking for trouble. This group of morons, when Mu Chen was at the Heavenly Transformation Stage initial phase, is already able to fight equally with senior brother Ji Yu Qianyang. The silent words in the students' hearts erupted out at this moment. However, no one spoke them out. As of now, the atmosphere was subtly causing people to feel comical. This video will end here.